welcome. So glad that you've been able to tune in today. We are just coming off of an amazing, amazing sermon over Psalm 103. And today for community groups, I want us to take just a little bit of a different approach. I want us to actually talk about everybody's favorite topic of conversation, our feelings. Now, of course, I say that facetiously. I know nobody really likes to talk about their feelings, or maybe some of us really do, and some of us are really just like, dude, I'm not about that. But before you turn this video off and you just move on, I want us to understand something that we were able to learn from our sermon today, and that's that feelings don't have to be the enemy, but they also don't need to be our God, right? They make a pretty poor substitute for both of those things. And whenever I say I want us to talk about our feelings, we need to understand why. Now, in this sermon, what we did is we were able to kind of approach dealing with the reality that many of us suffer from spiritual amnesia, and there needs to be some remedies to that, and we came up with two things. One of those things is to remember God's goodness, and the other thing is to remember our weakness, and it's important for us to have that framework as we have this conversation talking about our feelings, because feelings at times can lead us, if we're not careful, our feelings can lead us into a place of forgetfulness. They can lead us into a place of fear, or they can lead us into a place of faithfulness. Now, that's a wide range of things to talk about, but here's the reality. Feelings can take us to a place that's good or bad. And what Pastor Chris said that was so encouraging to me was that feelings can serve us in our worship of the Lord, but we have to remember that our feelings don't have brains, which means that we actually have the ability and we have the responsibility to sometimes tell our feelings what to feel. Now, when I say let's talk about our feelings, what I'm really asking us to do is just to be honest about how we're feeling in this climate in our society. Now, be careful, right? I'm not saying give us your opinions on politics or give us your opinions on the social movements that we're seeing across the world. What I'm saying is, how are you feeling? What are the emotions that rise up in you as we talk about these very divisive topics? Don't talk about the topics, talk about the feelings, and then we need to place those things at the feet of Jesus and see what God has to say about these things. Do our feelings position us to worship God? Now, if I'm going to ask you to talk about your feelings, I understand that's a very difficult thing. And it's hard for us to be vulnerable whenever we feel like we have to maintain composure in front of people that we respect, like our community groups. But in order for me to ask you to be vulnerable, I feel like it's also a responsibility for me to show you that it's completely possible. It might seem like, as a pastor, somebody with a degree in biblical studies, somebody who was raised in the church, it might seem like I might be the type of guy who has it all together. But the reality is this sermon hit me in the heart in a way that I didn't expect it to. And in order for me to talk about my feelings, I need to be honest about some of those things. Like, even as late as last night when I couldn't sleep, I told my wife that I'm just struggling and I don't really know what it is. And so I did what I think is probably the right avenue, and it's in those times I go to prayer, and I take these thoughts and these conflicts and these tensions in my heart, and I take them before the Lord and say, God, what's going on here? God, can we have some kind of resolve? And as I was able to take those things before the Lord, I would just weep because I was feeling like many of us feel, is in this time, God, I don't really feel like lifting up praises. I recognize that there's a lot to be happy for. There's a lot to take joy in. But God, right now in this moment, I don't feel like praising your name. God, not because I don't believe in you, not because I've lost faith, but God, the situations are just weighing me down. God, I'm tired. I'm tired of the process, Lord. I want to see the fulfillment. I want to see the fruit. I want to see you step into the promise that you have, God. And I want to see things completed. In this waiting, there's a tension. There's a frustration. And taking these things before the Lord and voicing my feelings didn't limit God. They don't confine God to movement. But here's what I was able to find. I found that as I was able to take some of these feelings to God, I was able to recognize what he's capable of doing. You see, what the psalmist teaches us in this passage is that we can fight spiritual amnesia whenever we remember. It's not that we remember our feelings. It's that we remember God's faithfulness over the fluctuations of life, the roller coasters of our feelings. And what this passage tells us is that we can remember his goodness. We start by remembering his goodness. We recognize that as crazy as life can be, God has consistently and faithfully been good. Though feelings can lead us into a place of faithlessness or faithfulness or forgetfulness or fear, what we also understand is that these feelings that we have can be conditioned as we remember God's goodness. And we remember God's goodness. When we remember God's goodness, we remind ourselves of his faithfulness. The reality that we can hold on to is that remembrance puts our feelings in their proper place. And I think specifically about what Joshua 24 verse 14 says is it's not so much that we're afraid of the world that's happening, of the things that are happening in the world around us, but like we see in Joshua, we put that fear in its proper place. And what the passage says is, therefore, fear not the world, not your situations, not the potential outcomes, but instead fear the Lord and worship him in sincerity and truth. And I love this. He goes on to say, and get rid of the gods your fathers worshipped beyond the Euphrates river and in Egypt, and worship the Lord. There's a proper place that fear has, and it's not that we fear the outcomes of our idols and gods, the things that we give our attention to, but instead when we remember that God is good and he is sovereign, we remember him and recognize what he's capable of doing. And then I love this, what Joshua goes on to say is he makes this commitment. As he places these things in their proper place, he reminds his people that he has made the decision to worship the Lord. He and his family, that's the place where they will worship the Lord. They will hold these things in priority. Now, community groups, as you have these conversations, be honest with each other, but make sure that your honesty doesn't just become a place to complain or just to even remain in a place of disparity or hardship. But turn these things to God. As we remember, we can together talk about our feelings, but we also learn that talking about them among ourselves doesn't give us what our soul longs for. It's as we take these things together to the Lord where we begin to experience the peace that surpasses all understanding and the joy that sustains us in the midst of trials. So as you remember these things, I would encourage you to talk about them with each other and take these things to the Lord. And here's the reality I also want us to think about. As community groups gather and we talk, what I would encourage you to do is put the community in community groups. Now it's a play on words, right? There's kind of two meanings to that. Community, yes, the people in your circle here. But what does it look like for your circle to be placed where it is in our community, our city? What is God using your community group to do to instill the hope of the world to a world who is longing for it? We talk about our feelings because we are struggling. Everybody in this culture is struggling in some capacity. We are whether they want to admit it or not, there is a longing in our souls for hope, for peace, for joy. And as a community group, as you take hold of what God offers you, he also equips you to take that joy out. Community groups, I'm thankful for the fact that you're able to meet. I'm thankful for the fact that you want to remain faithful. And I pray that as you have these conversations today and you're able to talk through what you're feeling, that you would be able to turn your attention away from the hardships of life and turn them back to the God who conquers those things. Community groups, be blessed.